Harry and Meghan may have finally got their UK return, but according to the dramatic new twist surrounding their comeback, they may have discovered that coming home does not mean getting everything they want. Behind the carefully polished image of a family reunion, a far more explosive scenario is now being imagined. The palace allegedly puts a new condition on their return. Harry and Meghan make a fresh demand, and the answer coming back from royal circles is reportedly the one they least wanted to hear: Britain will not be rebuilt around them. That is where this story becomes fascinating, because the biggest question is no longer whether Harry and Meghan can return to Britain. The question is what exactly they expect Britain to give them once they arrive. For years, the Sussex story has revolved around independence, privacy, security, freedom, and the ability to live according to their own rules. But now imagine walking back into the country you dramatically left and discovering that the rules are not yours to write. And that is the alleged new development at the center of this fictionalized update. Palace insiders are supposedly drawing a hard distinction between welcoming Harry as a son and giving Harry the royal privileges he once enjoyed. Those are two completely different things. Harry can come home, Meghan can come home, the children can establish a British base. But according to the scenario now being discussed, the palace could allegedly refuse a demand for any automatic royal role, special accommodation arrangement, guaranteed protection package, or informal return to the old Sussex position. And suddenly the phrase UK return starts sounding much less glamorous. Because remember how this story began. Harry was reportedly looking toward Britain before Meghan appeared fully committed to the idea. Property discussions, familiarity with the Cotswolds, old connections, and the pull of home were all part of the speculation. The more Harry talked about Britain, the more uncomfortable the California chapter appeared to look. And then came the bigger question. Was Harry preparing to build a British life even if Meghan wasn't ready to follow? That possibility changes everything, because if Harry was genuinely prepared to establish himself in Britain independently, Meghan joining the move becomes much more significant. Suddenly, this isn't simply a romantic homecoming. It becomes a negotiation over where the family lives, where the children are based, what happens to the California property, and perhaps most importantly, what position Harry occupies once he is physically back inside the British royal orbit. And this is where the alleged new palace rule becomes explosive. The fictional scenario is that Harry and Meghan arrive expecting flexibility, perhaps some kind of unofficial royal role, greater access to royal events, enhanced security consideration, and a level of accommodation that would make their transition back into Britain easier. But the palace allegedly responds with something much colder: you can return. You cannot rewrite the settlement. That single distinction would be devastating to the image of a triumphant Sussex comeback. For months, the story has been about Harry wanting a British base. But what happens when that British base exists and the institution surrounding it refuses to move with him? That is the real drama. Because Harry could have a beautiful property in the countryside. He could have his children attending British schools. He could reconnect privately with his father. He could walk familiar roads and attend selected family occasions. But none of that automatically makes him a working royal again. And according to the fictional development driving this update, that is precisely where Harry and Meghan allegedly hit the wall. The palace supposedly refuses to create a special arrangement simply because they have returned. No instant restoration. No automatic royal duties. No guaranteed taxpayer-funded security merely because they are living in Britain, and absolutely no repeat of the half-in, half-out experiment. That would leave Harry in an extraordinary position. He would be closer to the monarchy than he has been in years, while simultaneously discovering that proximity does not equal power, and the location matters. If Harry really is looking around the Cotswolds or areas connected to his former life, then the symbolism is enormous. He is not just buying another house. He is rebuilding a physical connection to the country he once described as home. But the palace can still keep the institutional door only partially open. That is what makes the alleged demand so controversial. Imagine Harry asking for a practical arrangement that would make his return easier, perhaps enhance protection around family movements, access to royal facilities, or a defined charitable role that could strengthen his security case. Then imagine the response: no special deal. That would be the ultimate humiliation for a man returning after years of publicly criticizing the system, because suddenly every old argument comes back. Security, family, duty, privacy, the monarchy, the British public. The very institution Harry once appeared desperate to escape becomes the institution he may now need to negotiate with. And there is another layer that makes this even more explosive. But the most explosive part of this alleged new arrangement is what happens when the discussion moves from where Harry and Meghan will live to what they believe they should receive once they are there. That is where the entire return return starts looking less like a simple family reunion and more like a negotiation. The palace, according to this fictionalized development, has supposedly made it clear that returning to Britain does not automatically restore the privileges that once surrounded Harry. No automatic working royal status, no guaranteed special security package, and no arrangement designed to recreate the half-in, half-out existence that previously collapsed. Harry can return, but the institution remains in control of the terms. That would be particularly awkward because Harry has spent years talking about how difficult Britain became for him, especially when it came to security and his family. Yet now the country he once described as impossible to bring his children back to is suddenly being presented as a practical home again. The irony almost writes itself. The alleged palace position is not that Harry is forbidden from returning. It is that Harry cannot return expecting the monarchy to rearrange itself around his new circumstances. And if that really is the message, Meghan Markle would face the same uncomfortable reality. Britain may be available, but the old royal privileges are not waiting on the doorstep. The security issue becomes especially important here. Prince Harry has repeatedly fought over his protection arrangements, and a return to Britain could change the practical calculation without guaranteeing the result he wants. Simply living in the United Kingdom does not automatically make somebody entitled to taxpayer-funded protection. Even if Harry establishes a permanent British base, any official security decision would remain dependent on the relevant authorities and circumstances. That creates a problem for the alleged demand at the heart of this update. If Harry expected his return to unlock a more substantial security arrangement, the palace rejecting that expectation would be a major blow. And then comes the family question, which is arguably even more explosive. King Charles could welcome his son privately while refusing to restore him publicly. That distinction matters enormously. A father can open a door to reconciliation without reopening the institutional door to royal duties. According to the fictional scenario, that is exactly the boundary being drawn. Harry might receive family contact, private meetings, and personal warmth, but none of those things would amount to a royal comeback. The difference could leave Harry technically closer to the family while remaining firmly outside the working structure of the monarchy. For Meghan, the situation could become even more complicated. If the original expectation was that Harry would establish himself in Britain while Meghan remained in America, then her decision to join the move creates an entirely different dynamic. Suddenly, both of them are physically inside the same country as the royal family they once left behind. The children become part of that British foundation too. But if the palace refuses their latest demand, their return could look less like a victory and more like a compromise they were forced to accept. And then there is William. Prince William has no obligation to pretend that the previous years never happened simply because Harry has returned. The public disputes, family tensions, and accusations remain part of the history. If William keeps his distance, that distance could become one of the defining images of this new chapter. Harry may be back in Britain, but he cannot force the future king to restore the relationship on demand. That is why this alleged new rule could become so damaging to the Sussex comeback narrative. The real shock would not be that Harry and Meghan returned. The shock would be discovering that they returned without the leverage they expected. Britain may welcome the family back privately, but the palace in this fictionalized scenario is supposedly saying something much sharper: you can come home, but you cannot dictate the terms. And if that is the reality waiting for Harry and Meghan, their British return may be only the beginning of a much bigger royal confrontation.